60,000 workers protest across the country as relations between unions and the government worsen. Big miner Rio Tinto announces plans to plant 750,000 trees, and Meta moves to restrict children from accessing Instagram. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Thursday, the 19th of September 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, we've got some exciting news that we'll get to in a little bit. We've got a few stories that we need to chat about first, so just park your excitement for a moment if you can. The main story this morning is actually a big one, isn't it? Relations between the government and the union movement have hit a new low, with an estimated 60,000 construction workers yesterday protesting the forced administration of the CFMEU.
Unionists backing the CFMEU have targeted anyone assisting the administrator as the biggest betrayers of the movement. That's a quote. They called for the scalps of employers who seek to back out of pay deals during the administration. Yesterday was the second major rally in 2 months. The protesters threatened a third walkout and a 3-day strike. There were plenty of not-so-veiled threats and very aggressive language. The Electrical Trade Union's Victorian Secretary Troy Gray threatened strikes against Lang O'Rourke, John Holland and Asiona if the builders used the CFMEU administration to wind back the clock on conditions. He went on to warn builders, and I quote, "If you want to F with us, we will F with you." Use the full word, of course. He played down reports of the CFMEU appointing bikies as workplace delegates on building sites, saying that was 12 or 14 bikers out of 300,000 construction workers. Earlier this week, former counsel for the Independent Commission Against Corruption, Geoffrey Watson, SC, who the CFMEU appointed to investigate the Victorian branch, made preliminary findings that bikies and organised crime figures had infiltrated the union. Now, yesterday, International Transport Workers Federation organiser and former Maritime Union leader Paul McAleer said, and I quote, "There is not a single guilty union official of the CFMEU." Instead, he blamed the government and media of complicity with criminality, sacked CFMEU New South Wales leader Darren Greenfield, who's facing charges for taking bribes from an employer, claims he denies, urged the Sydney protesters to, and I quote, "take the community and families with us in the next election to make sure that these effers," i.e. Labor, disappear. Australian Manufacturing Workers Union Victorian Secretary Tony Mavromatis said in Melbourne that the CFMEU does not need administrators. We know how to fix our problems. Get the F out of our way and let us do our jobs.
Sean, I never quite know what to make of these. Like, huge crowds, like extraordinarily kind of inflammatory language. Do these rallies help the union movement? Do they help the CFMEU?
Well, when 60,000 people show up for an unauthorised rally, it shows that the CFMEU has support. I'm just not sure the threats and aggressive behaviour from union officials win over many friends. Maybe it works inside the industry, but I doubt it works too well outside. There's a criminal element within the CFMEU, and that needs to be sorted out, full stop. I mean, it surprises me that the leadership and members of the union don't seem to want to address that. It's illegal behaviour. That just is not allowed. Some of the other things which are more at the margins about, terms and conditions, I mean, that's for negotiating and the unions play a great role in that. But if there's criminal activity, surely we want to get rid of that. Anyway, just like the business leaders are frustrated with the Albanese government for the new IR laws, many of the union movement are frustrated about the CFMEU administration. But guess what? It ain't going to change.
Yeah, these were remarkable scenes yesterday. Local markets, how did they perform?
The S&P ASX 200 hit a new record high, Michael. You'd be very excited about that. 8,153.5 points. Though it closed flat for the day at 8,142 points.
Takes a little bit of the gloss off, doesn't it?
It does.
It's hit a new record high, but then to close flat. Like, come on, just finish high.
5 of the 11 sub indices of the index were higher, 5 were lower, and consumer staples, that index was flat. Utility stocks were among the best performers, while the materials companies were among the worst. The big miners continue to struggle. BHP and Rio were both down more than 1% after forecasts of iron ore prices falling to $80 a tonne. National Australia Bank was a standout among large caps, jumping 1.1%. It hit a new 17-year high. That's the best since pre-global financial crisis of 2007. Locally, bond traders have priced in an 85% chance of a rate cut this year from the Reserve Bank, even though Governor Michelle Bullock has made it clear she doesn't see rates falling until at least 2025. We'll find out more about the chances of a rate cut at 11:30am this morning when the Bureau of Statistics labour force stats are released.
Oh, very exciting. And what's happening in international markets?
A quick run through the numbers here. Brent crude's trading around $73 a barrel. Gold has come off its record high. It's still worth nearly $25.70 an ounce. Iron ore steady around $91 a barrel. Bitcoin's back above $60,000 a unit, and the Aussie dollar's buying 67.7 US cents.
Okay, I can't hold it in anymore. Sean,
Tell us.
Our very exciting news. It's a big day for us here at Fear and Greed. The launch of a brand new podcast today. It is called The Property Pendulum, brought to you by Domain and Fear and Greed. It is the podcast, Sean, that tells you which way the property market is going to swing and, perhaps most importantly, how to make the most of it.
A swinging property market.
Don't go anywhere.
No, I'm not, Michael. I'm not. Launch of a new podcast. Job. Very, very, very exciting. So what's the first episode about? What am I going to line myself up for today?
Well, the first episode, Sean, is about 4 things every home buyer needs to know before making an offer. And so the podcast is me and Alice Stoltz, who is the national property editor at Domain.
Alice Stoltz and I, if you don't mind. Anyway, tell me about the pod.
This is extraordinary. The podcast, The Property Pendulum. Alice Stoltz and I, or me and Alice Stoltz. Alice is, of course, the national property editor at Domain, and I would say a property guru. I would say that she knows more about property than pretty much anyone in this country. And so we go through the 4 things, and it's quite detailed and quite a few surprises in there. So if you're in the property market, if you are buying, if you are selling, if you're just interested and engaged in it and curious about it, then you can check this podcast out. It comes out every Thursday. It is in its own playlist. So search for The Property Pendulum wherever you listen to podcasts. But also, you will hear it right here on Fear and Greed, because straight after this episode, you'll hear The Property Pendulum pop up after that. You'll hear yours truly.
Fantastic. I look forward to it.
Anyway, Sean, we have plenty of things still to cover. Lots of news around. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, miner Rio Tinto will plant about 750,000 trees on 3,000 hectares of grazing land near Townsville in Queensland. That sounds like a lot.
It is a lot. It's part of Rio's push into carbon neutral fuels. The idea is to harvest the seeds from the 750 Pongamia trees and refine their oils into a form of renewable diesel. That diesel, in theory, will power Rio's trucks and generators. Like traditional fuels made with oil extracted from underground rocks, biofuels release carbon into the atmosphere when burned. But, according to a report in the Fin Review anyway, they're considered neutral for the climate because the carbon in biofuels was sucked out of the atmosphere by the tree. So the burning of a biofuel doesn't actually release additional carbon into the atmosphere. Interesting. Rio will own the land and the trees, but a wood fibre company called Midway will actually tend to the crop. The miner picked the Pongamia tree because it's native to Australia and can proliferate in the northern half of the country. Rio doesn't plan to build a seed crushing plant nor a biofuel refinery at the site. Instead, it will rely on third parties to process the raw materials. But the concept is fantastic. Really interesting.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story, that one, Sean. Now, Moody's Ratings says mortgage delinquency rates in Australia will rise further this year as the cost of living hurts households.
The ratings agency said high interest rates and sticky inflation were causing financial stress and more people were falling behind in their mortgage payments. The share of prime quality home loans that were at least 30 days in arrears increased marginally to 1.73% in June from 1.72% in March. Delinquency rates for lower quality mortgages, including loans to borrowers with poor credit histories or those that lenders assessed using alternative documentation, rose from 4.01% to 4.23%. That's quite a jump. This group includes self-employed borrowers, low-income homeowners, and those with high loan-to-value ratio mortgages. According to a report in The Australian, Moody said that after rising steadily for the last 2 years from a historically low base, delinquency rates are now around long-term averages.
Echo Law has launched a class action in the federal court on behalf of Harvey Norman customers allegedly sold unnecessary and worthless extended warranties. This is interesting.
I have one. I have a couple of these, in fact. Tens of thousands. Well, I'm not actually siding with Echo Law here. I should point that out.
Important thing to clarify.
Yeah, absolutely. Tens of thousands of Harvey Norman, Domain and Joyce Main customers who were sold extended warranties between September 2018 and now will be covered by the class action, with hundreds of millions of dollars estimated to have been paid by those customers in largely worthless warranty costs over the period. The case centres around Harvey Norman's product care and extended warranties sold with products such as electronics and white goods, which claims to offer additional protection to consumers where there is a fault with their product. Echo Law's class action alleges that product care provides no value to consumers, as the protection it offers customers is no more than the rights and remedies already provided to those consumers under the Australian consumer law. Now, according to media reports, the class action lawsuit alleges Harvey Norman breached the law by engaging in misleading or deceptive conduct, as well as unconscionable conduct, by leading customers to believe that the extended warranty would give them additional protection they would not have otherwise had. Harvey Norman said that its stores had complied with all relevant laws at all times, and it intends to defend the proceedings vigorously.
New Hope has entered the race to buy Anglo American's 5 coal mines in Queensland and warned the UK-listed miner that its asking price will need to come down to get a deal done.
New Hope is primarily a thermal coal producer, and Anglo's mines are coking coal. Now, coking coal, sometimes called metallurgical coal, typically contains more carbon, produces high-quality coke, which is used in blast furnaces to make steel. Thermal coal, on the other hand, is mostly used for electricity. Anglo's portfolio was expected to be sold in one parcel and fetch $5 billion, but a few months ago, a fire broke out in the Grosvenor mine, and the asking price now is expected to be less.
The ongoing rationalisation in the super industry continues, Sean, with Equip Super and Telstra Super exploring a merger that would create a $60 billion fund.
The boards of the two funds have entered a merger agreement via a non-binding memorandum of understanding. The plan is expected to be completed late next year, pending due diligence. The Australian Prudential Regulation Authority is encouraging consolidation as it tightens scrutiny of pension funds and performances, though deals are complex to execute. Australian Retirement Trust recently agreed to merge with smaller rival Qantas Super. Care Super and Spirit Super are also merging. Now, Equip Super has around $35 billion of assets. Telstra Super has about $26 billion, combined 225,000 members. Good luck to them.
Indeed. In international news, the war in the Middle East has taken a dangerous turn, with pages used by Hezbollah members used as weapons, purportedly by Israel, in an attack that killed 9 and injured thousands.
So pages belonging to Hezbollah members exploded across Lebanon in an apparent sabotage of the low-tech systems the militant group uses to evade Israeli surveillance and assassination attempts. The blast took place in several areas of Lebanon, including the capital, Beirut. Iran-backed Hezbollah, the dominant political and military force in Lebanon, blamed Israel for what it described as a criminal attack, adding that reprisals are likely. Israel's military declined to comment. In a statement, the UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon called the attack an extremely concerning escalation and urged all parties to refrain from any further action or bellicose rhetoric, which could trigger a wider conflagration that nobody can afford. Hezbollah said that at about 3:30 p.m. local time, many pages belonging to people working in its different units and institutions exploded. Lebanon's health ministry said 9 people, including a child, had been killed in the blasts and more than 2,700 were injured.
I mentioned this next one at the top of the show, Sean. Meta is putting Instagram users under the age of 18 into new teen accounts to allow parents greater control over their activities, including the ability to block children from viewing the app at night.
The change will apply to new teen users, but will also be extended to existing accounts held by teenagers over the next few months. Changes under the teen account setting include giving parents the ability to set daily time limits for using the app, block teens from using Instagram at certain times, see the accounts their child is exchanging messages with, and being shown the content categories they are viewing, according to a report in The Guardian. Teenagers signing up to Instagram are already placed by default into the strictest privacy settings, which include barring adults from messaging teens who don't follow them, and muting notifications at night. Under the new teen account feature, users under the age of 16 will need parental permission to change those settings, while 16 and 17-year-olds defaulted into the new features will be able to change them independently. The new account setting will apply to users in the US, UK, Canada, and here in Australia.
And finally, Sean, US rapper and business mogul Sean Combs has been charged with using his fame and fortune to run a sex trafficking enterprise, assault several women, and prevent alleged victims of sexual coercion from fleeing.
That's according to a federal indictment unsealed in New York, as reported by the Financial Times. The 54-year-old, also known as Diddy, was arrested on Monday night and pleaded not guilty during an initial court appearance. He was denied bail and ordered to remain in custody. The formal allegations against him come after the FBI raided Combs' homes in California and Florida as part of a long-running investigation, and the leaking of a video that appeared to show him kicking and beating a woman in a hotel corridor. In their filing to a Manhattan federal court, US prosecutors said Combs had, over the course of at least a decade, I quote, abused, threatened and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation and conceal his conduct, end quote. The charges include racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking and transportation for purposes of prostitution. The most serious charge carries a maximum sentence of life in prison. Combs will appeal against the decision, denying him bail, and he denies all the allegations.
Okay, now up next is, as I mentioned, the new podcast, The Property Pendulum, thanks to Fear and Greed and our friends at Domain. After that, Sean, we have an interview coming up with Liz Ritchie from the Regional Australia Institute.
Yeah, all new data about people moving from the city to the regions, and it looks at basically how inexpensive the regions are. So it compares income medians or average incomes to the cost of housing in some of these places. And Liz talks about, Melbourne compared to Ballarat, and just how much cheaper it is to live in those regional areas. We also talk about, getting jobs in those places and education and health facilities. It's just a really interesting chat about the changing demographics of Australia.
Yeah, from the property pendulum into a conversation about what to look for if you're considering making a tree change. It feels like those two podcasts go together very, very neatly, almost as though we planned it.
Almost. If only we knew.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so there's a bit coming up in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Thursday, the 19th of September, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast. And please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.